Hey guys, welcome to Learn Web API in 7 days course. In this video, I'm going to talk about the following things. So we are going to talk about the basic concept of Web API, and in that we will be giving a brief introduction of ASP.NET Web API, and then we will try to understand why we should use ASP.NET Web API, and then we will look at what are the problems which ASP.NET Web API can solve for us. And then we'll also try to figure out the places where Web API can be useful, and then we will have a look at the learning path of this course. And towards the end of this video, I'm going to create a simple Web API application in Visual Studio 2017. So let's move forward. The introduction of ASP.NET Web API. Well, ASP.NET Web API is a technology which helps developers to develop HTTP-based services which can be consumed by a variety of client applications. And those client applications can be mobile apps, web applications, and different web browsers. ASP.NET Web API is actually one of the greatest technologies available these days for developing RESTful API-based services. ASP.NET Web API is actually part of ASP.NET MVC latest version 4.0, and hence it works really well with ASP.NET MVC applications. Now, why we should use Web API? Well, these days there are devices which can connect to internet. And when these devices connect to internet, they need to get some kind of data from variety of data stores. Now, to help these applications to get data from data sources, these applications need some kind of services. And ASP.NET Web API is the best fit for that. So there can be different kind of client applications like running on Windows phones, iPhone, Android, iPad, Windows, or a WPF client. All these can consume ASP.NET Web API. Now, what is the problem it solves? Well, before ASP.NET Web API, we have WCF, which could be used for developing RESTful API services. But then there was an issue with WCF. We have to configure that WCF service to make it a particular client consumable API. But this is not the case with ASP.NET Web API. You can create a simple ASP.NET Web API, and there is no extra configuration required to get this API consumed by various clients. So this is the benefit, and this is the problem it solves. Now, the learning path of this course, we will be starting off with simple Web API development, and then we will be moving towards the advanced features of ASP.NET Web API. My advice to the students is to try to learn as much as possible in previous lectures before moving to the next set of lectures. There are some prerequisites which we would like to tell to the students. It's good if you have programming knowledge, but I think every programmer is actually knowledgeable enough to learn this course properly, and it would be great if you have Microsoft.NET skills also, and knowing how to use Microsoft Visual Studio will be a plus, and understanding ASP.NET MVC technology is also desirable for this course. Now, in this video, we are going to have one exercise wherein we will be creating a simple ASP.NET Web API application. So let's start with that. I have Visual Studio here, which I am going to use for creating ASP.NET Web API project. So I I started this new project window pane, and then let's go to web. In web we have two options. We can create core web applications, and also we can create .NET standard applications. We can give it a name. So let's say we give it web API test, and let's put it somewhere in useful location. Let's put it here. I can give that path here, and then try to select this folder. Now this is my folder path where the application is going to create, and I'll say OK. Now another pane is come. In this pane we have to define what kind of application we are going to create. We can create a simple web form based application, we can create a MVC application, and we can create a web API. So in this course we are going to create a web API. So I'm going to say OK. Now it is creating the solution in the project for the web API project. So I'm having this Visual Studio 2017 here. So with these latest versions of Visual Studio, when we try to create a project, it actually starts pulling all the dependencies of the project, and it takes a time initially to start off. So you can see here it is adding all the required dependencies, and it is doing a NuGet actually automatically for us. So once it is done with the solution creation, yeah, it's done. So here we can see that we have this web API application here. Now there are two important things to understand here. First one is this app start, wherein we have these API configuration classes. Most important of these classes is this one, web API config, wherein the routing of the web API, like how it can be called and how the calls will happen to API controllers, that is defined here, and there are many other settings that can be placed over here. Also we have routes config that actually tells like how a controller can be reached from API URI, and then we have filters also, and bundle config, which actually bundles up everything for the application. Now then second thing is these controllers. Home controller, this is actually a MVC controller. So what happens when we create a ASP.NET web API project, it actually creates by default ASP.NET MVC application, and from that application we can browse through the web API. So we have this values controller, which is actually a API controller. So this is the controller which we are going to work with, and this home controller, this is MVC controller, which we use to load this test application. Now let's run this app and try to see how it goes. So it's building. The building actually takes some time because it is doing post build, so it is going to take a little bit of time. Once the application is built, it will open it in the browser. So it's loading it. It's actually starting the development server. As Express is started here at the bottom, and it's loading the app. Once the app is loaded, then what we will do, we'll try to run this values controller. So let me put a breakpoint here, and so it's still loading. Let the application load, and then we have to actually tell the browser like how we can call this web API. So this is default API, that means this is the API name. So we need not to change anything, but we can change this. For now we will keep this API only, but this is how the API route is by default defined. So we'll have default application name, the API keyword, and then the controller name, and then the ID parameter if we are passing any. Now the application is loaded, and I want to hit this API controller, this method. So for that I need to provide the default API name and the controller name. Controller name is here values. So what I am going to do is backslash API and then values. Okay, so now as we see here in web URIs it is always front slash, so I purposely put backslash and it automatically changes to front slash. Now you can see here the execution control is come here, it's in debug mode, and our values controller is hit here, and this is API control, and this is the object it is going to return. So I just let it run, and then you can see here. So this is how it is being returned, and by default it is returning XML. We can return a JSON also. Okay, and now let's see, and if we change something here then something can happen. So let's say I want to put a different name here. Before we can change we need to stop debugging, and then let's say I want to say John. See now, and let's see whether or not these changes are reflected or not. So again it's doing a build. It's not showing that time because it is a second build. Now let's call the API. I'm hitting the API controller. The hit should come here. The S is running. Machine is a little slow actually. So yeah, the hit is come. I'm just letting it go, and we should be able to see the changes here. So this is how we can create a very simple ASP.NET web API, and which we can consume from any client application. Thank you for watching this video. See you in next lecture.